Hello lovelies, welcome back to my channel. This week we are doing another stash busting project and we are making this gown, but make it witchy. So I found this Selkie dress back in March of last year and I absolutely loved it. I loved how it moved. I loved just like the way that the models look like they feel when they wear it. I know that's acting, but I don't know, I just envisioned myself in a similar one, but in black. And then I went to my stash and I found this celestial black and gold organza, and I kind of just knew, like, I need this. I need to make this. I had every intention to make it last spring, and yet here we are. It is now September, mid-September, and I'm finally making this dress. Okay, so this is the plan for this dress. I purchased a bodice pattern for it. I will be using the sleeve pattern that I developed for my Selkie-inspired dress, and then I'm just gonna kind of wing it on the skirt portions. And I decided that I wanted to be more extravagant and make more work for myself. So I found this astrological embroidery files on Etsy that I will be using to kind of like spatter around the sleeves and the skirt portion of this dress because, you know, I need more machine embroidery in my life, I guess. That's what I'm telling you. Yeah, I guess let's get into making a mock-up and making this dress. Yay! Okay, so I just sewed up the first mock-up and I just easily wrapped it around my waist, and I'll be very honest with you, it's almost an entire panel too big. I know there's going to be a zipper, and I know that it's like I'm leaving 3/4 of an inch on each side for the zipper, but still, like, having almost like a hand too big is way too big in my opinion. So I'm going to recut out my pieces, but in this size underneath, and try this all over again. This is the last of this pretty fabric, so I'm glad I got just a tiny bit of camera time before I set it aside. I threw the cups away already. I was a little angry. I actually threw all of it away, and then I took it out of my, well, not threw it away, but fabric stash thing. Took it out, and we're gonna try again. Round 2. Mock-ups are important. All right, so mock-up number 2 is a success. I only did one of the cups. I'm going to explain the whole cup and all the processes of this, constructing this bodice when I construct it, because there's quite a few steps that are going to go into the actual one that didn't go into this mock-up. But I'm pretty happy with this mock-up. I am extremely happy with this superstructure foam, basically like cup, like boob breast cup, I guess. I don't really know what else to call it, but this makes me really happy. This fits me. I knocked it down an entire size. Then what I did was, even though I added a 1/2 inch to all my pieces, I sewed all of my pieces at 5/8 of an inch, which would make it like 1 more eighth smaller everywhere. The back still might have a little bit too much in it. Like, I cut this one, I did them all at a 1/2 inch versus 3/4 of an inch at the back, but I still think I'll need the full like 3/4 for the zipper. Again, I'm fine with it. So now what I'm gonna do is take out half of this. I didn't cup the second bralette part, so I will take this apart, label them all, and this will now be my pattern. So when I go to cut out my black fabric and stuff, you'll see me using this piece instead of the pattern piece. So I guess it's time to construct the bodice. I also just want to share with you all my new favorite podcast, Foolish Mortals, to all of my Haunted Mansion friends. I love this, and I'll make sure to link it below, but I'm on the 2nd episode and I am living for this content.
After I took apart the mock-up, it was time to cut out my fabric. Since organza is sheer, I decided that I was going to flat line it onto black cotton for the bodice and then line it with black cotton as well. So I cut out 4 fabric pieces for each pattern piece in my black cotton, and then 2 fabric pieces for each pattern piece in the organza. I started the construction of the bodice with the cups, and I cut out 2 pieces of superstructure foam for each cup pattern piece. Superstructure foam is a fusible, sewable foam that is great for collars, and during this process I discovered it's a great alternative for cups on gowns. Once the foam was cut, I adhered it to the wrong side of my cotton cup lining piece by pressing it on a medium or wool setting with the little glue dot sides to the wrong side of my cotton. Next, I pinned the cup pieces together based on the instructions from the pattern pieces. I did label my mock-up pattern pieces so I knew how each piece went together. Then I stitched the foam pieces together. For the fashion fabric part of the cup, I flatlined the organza to the cotton. I will explain this process a little bit more in depth once we get to the bodice part, but once this was done, I pinned and stitched the cup pieces together just like I did with the foam cup pieces. Then I top stitched the seams down to the side so it would lay flat, but also so I knew which cup was which. With right sides together, I stitched the foam cup layer to the fashion fabric layer at the top edge. Then I trimmed that down to 1/4 of an inch and flipped the foam to the inside and stitched around the entire finished cup piece. Now, to flatline the fashion fabric for the bodice, I start by laying the wrong side of the organza to the right side of the cotton and pin all the way around the edges. Then I will machine baste this down about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge so that this stitch is hidden when I sew the panels together. Finally, they are pressed and the process is repeated for all of the fashion fabric pieces. Starting at the center front, I pinned each pattern piece with the right sides together. I like to do things in batches, so I pinned all the pieces together and then took the entire thing over to the sewing machine to stitch the pieces together at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I pressed the seams open on both the inside and the outside of the garment. Now I will add the cups to the fashion fabric. First, I will cut notches in the curve of the fabric, and then I can pin the cup into the fabric with the right sides together, and these notches will allow me to maneuver this curve so that everything can line up perfectly. For the lining, I start by pinning all of the pieces together, sewing them, and pressing them open like I did with the fashion fabric. Once all the seams were pressed open and flat, I added tape for the plastic boning on the inside of the lining over the seam allowances. I start at 1/2 of an inch from the top for seam allowance up there, and then I pin it down, ending about 1/2 an inch from the bottom for seam allowances down there. Once all the channels were pinned, I took the lining over to my machine and I stitched it down on both sides of the tape. Then I trimmed the boning to fit in the channels and rounded the edges, so now it's time to move on to the sleeves. The pattern I used for the sleeves is the exact pattern I made for my Sakizo amethyst gown. I didn't make any modifications to it for this dress. I did cut the fabric and then bring it right over to my embroidery machine for some gold embroidery work. I used Floriani water-soluble stabilizer and I hooped the organza and stabilizer together on my smaller hoop. Then I brought it over to the machine to stitch it out. I did have to babysit these designs because I wanted to stop them before they reached the name of the sign. Basically, each embroidery file had the stars and then also the name, so like Leo or Sagittarius, and I didn't want the words to be on my sleeve, just the stars. So I ended up stitching out 5 signs on each sleeve at about 6 to 8 minutes each sign. So that kind of sucked up a lot of my day. Then I cleaned up each embroidery piece in between each section so that I didn't have a lot of like trimming and things to do at the end. I really loved using this gold metallic thread from Floriani. It pops so well on my fabric and I feel like it adds a really nice detail to the sleeves. I did have this soak in water while I was actually making the bodice. So I rinsed the stabilizer out and then I set it to soak while making the bodice. And then once it dried the next day, I was able to sew up these sleeves. For the sleeve construction, I started at the bottom hem and folded it up 3/8 of an inch and then 3/8 of an inch a second time and pressed and pinned it. Then I was able to stitch it down pretty easily from that point. From there, I marked the placement of the elastic channel, and then I decided to create a tube of fabric with my black cotton by cutting a 3-inch wide strip the length of the sleeve. I stitched it together and then turned it right sides out and pressed it flat. I stitched the tubing onto the organza, then I cut 2 pieces of elastic the circumference of my bicep, and I fed the elastic through the tubing and stitched it down on each side. From there, I serged the top and sides of these sleeve pieces. I sewed the sleeve together, and then I folded the top seam down 1/2 inch and fed more elastic through that to make the sleeve puffy.
Okie dokie, so I didn't get footage of the sleeves really at all, but I think the last thing that you saw was I sewed in, or I safety pinned and like fed elastic through this. Then what I did was I just overlocked all 3 of these edges, so this seam and then the top seam up here, and then I sewed the sleeve together, right sides together, and then I folded this top portion under by 1/2 inch and I fed elastic through that. I did the elastic actually after putting the sewing the sleeve to the bodice. So you can see here it's attached to my top layer of my bodice, and I did a little bit of a pleat on each side of this piece. So like I pinned it here and then I did a little bit of a pleat and a little bit of a pleat, so there's a little bit at the bottom here. And now I am going to sew the lining to this. So now I need to basically pin the lining to this. I will be really honest with you, at some point between the mock-up, the second mock-up, and this bodice, it got smaller at the top by 2 full inches. So I made these back panels, and I'll explain how I'm gonna use these once I get the lining in. I'm pretty annoyed by it, and honestly, I'm near the end of the 3rd day on this project, and I don't really like the way that it looks. And I haven't even started the skirts. So it just feels like another like meh project, which kind of sucks because, you know, I was really hoping I could make something cute to wear, and I don't know if I'm gonna even ever wanna wear this.
Okay, so I don't end up showing you any more of the construction footage besides pinning this to the right sides together. So then I will flip this inside out, I will flip this so that the right side is on the outside, and I will end up hand stitching the cup part where the lining is, so the lining will stitch over the cup part so that that seam is hidden. And then I'm just going to end up overlocking the bottom edge of the sides and bottom edge of the bodice. And then the last thing I do is add that little panel that you saw on the back. Literally all I did was fold it in by 1/2 inch on both sides, and then like sew it down, top stitch it down so that it adds 1 inch on to each side of the bodice. Now we're gonna move on to the skirt.
Okie dokie, so for the skirt, I know that it is supposed to be a circle skirt, and probably even like 2 circle skirts gathered down would be the absolute best / most ideal. However, we are limited to 5 yards of this fabric. You cannot purchase this fabric anymore. People last spring I had like 7 or 8 different people check their own local Joann fabrics. We can't find it. So I'm limited to the like 4 to 5 yards I had. So we're gonna just do strips of rectangles and gather them down at the waist and go from there. So how I plan to do the top rectangle part is I'm gonna make a black circle skirt out of cotton underneath. I probably won't do much information on this. I've made a million circle skirts on this channel, so I apologize. I'm just gonna whip this up. Okay, then the next thing is, this is my ruffle. So the top portion of this skirt is, I believe, 23 inches long, like from my belly button to my knee. And then I did 2 strips of that on my 60-inch wide fabric. So it'll be 120-ish inches. I do have to serge the white edges off because they'll be seen. So it'll be about like 120 inches gathered down. So then I did 16-inch wide strips of the rest of it. So I did 4 of those to double the amount that's on that. So that would be 240 inches all the way around. And then this is going to get gathered. The first thing I'm going to do, or that I've already done, I cut everything already. The first thing that I did was overlock all of the edges that had the white like Joann fabric things on it. The other ones, they're fine. Like, this is the salvage. It's not going anywhere. I just have to sew this into it. So I did that for the top and bottom tier, and I want the top tier to have more of this pretty embroidery that I did on the sleeves. So I'm gonna save that until tomorrow, because I'm working on this tomorrow. It'll be the 4th or 5th day I've been working on this. Yeah, whatever. 2-day build. Who do I think I am? Anyway, so I'm gonna sew all these edges together, and then I'm going to try to get the hem done. The hem, I want to basically have a hem on top and bottom, because when I go to ruffle this down, it's actually gonna ruffle down and then get attached to the top of the skirt, and I will explain that when we get there. So sew these together and then create a rolled hem on the top and bottom, and then go from there.
So just to start out, I did not end up getting around to adding the embroidery to the skirt. Time-wise, it made absolutely no sense, and it would have added an extra day onto this project, so we skipped that. And I went straight into rolling the edges of the ruffle. So I literally just pressed the top and bottom edge down 3/8 of an inch twice, just like we did on the sleeves. And then I stitched it in place for a clean finish. Then I stitched the circle skirt pieces, those were the lining pieces, together to create the full circle. And then the rectangle skirt pieces together to create the full strip of the top skirt tier. From there, I added gather stitches into the top of this top tier, and I actually broke that into 4 segments, so 4 different sets of gather stitches, and then I pinned it to the circle skirt and gathered it down. Then I repeated this process, adding 4 different gather stitches to the ruffle, and gathered that down and stitched it on top of the bottom of the skirt tier. So basically about 1/2 inch from the top, from the bottom of the skirt tier, I pinned the ruffle onto it and then stitched it down from the top. And once we were there, all we really had to do was sew this skirt piece to the bodice and then sew up the back and add a zipper. And I did those all off camera, because at this point in the project, I was like, this was only supposed to take 2 days and it's taken almost 6. A special thank you to all of my patrons who make my costume creations a reality. If you would like to support my costumes, you can head on over to patreon.com/CaseyReneeCostume. Right now, we are working towards raising funds so that I can make the bubble dress that Glinda wears at the beginning of the musical Wicked. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my channel. And until next time, may all your dreams come true.